For Carolina, yeah, they're in the news as of late, but we'll get there when we get there. So for Carolina, their 2021 was pretty poor. It was pretty piss poor because you get off to this 3-0 start with your new quarterback, Sam Darnold from the New York Jets. But Sam Darnold was okay. He was 50-50. He played good in the first game. And then when you get to the second and third game, he showed flashes of the old Sam Darnold from when he was with the New York Jets. But you still had a feisty defense that kind of saved his butt. So the Panthers get off to this 3-0 start. But then when you lose to the Dallas Cowboys, and then when you lose to the Philadelphia Eagles, because mainly, well, you pretty much got exposed that Sam Darnold's not the quarterback that Carolina signed him up for. And then you also have Christian McCaffrey, your supposed star running back, get injured again. And then you get injuries in the defense. And then Matt Rhule pretty much screws up the quarterback position again when Sam Darnold gets hurt. He brings in Cam Newton, the washed quarterback from trying to revive the glory days of the 2015 Carolina Panthers, but clearly he's not the same quarterback that he once was, who was also released by the New England Patriots, and you sign him back into Carolina, and unfortunately, Cam Newton was a one-week wonder. So the Panthers pretty much only win 2 games after their 3-0 start. They go 5-11, and people were wondering, was Matt Rhule going to get fired? And unfortunately for Carolina fans, he was not. Matt Rhule, despite all his micromanagement with the quarterback position and pretty much like the play calling, he was not fired. Who did get fired was their offensive coordinator in 2021, despite what Matt Rhule was doing at the most important position of the game. So, tough luck, tough shit. Unfortunate stuff there too for the Carolina Panthers. So, very unfortunate there. So, when I did my season recap of the Carolina Panthers, my priorities for them was mainly about the quarterback position. Who was going to be the starting quarterback for 2022? Because they had no solid answer in 2021. Sam Darnold was well exposed to the fact that he's not going to be a starter. A change of scenery was not enough to prove that he can be a reliable starting quarterback. PJ Walker has been there for almost 2 to 3 years now, and he's not the guy. And then you brought in Cam Newton for half a season, and he was again a one-week wonder. And then after that, against the Washington football team, he folded. So for Carolina, you had to figure out what your solution was going to be at the quarterback position, despite Matt Rhule's reign of terror. Then you had to rehaul the offensive line because, in spite of all the crappiness at quarterback, your offensive line was one of the worst in the NFL. I'd say almost worse than the New York Jets offensive line. Before they started to come along and gel together late in the season for the Jets. Then you also had to re-sign corner Dante Jackson because aside from getting Stephon Gilmore early in the season, Dante Jackson was kind of a key part in the secondary. He was a very good corner for Carolina, an integral part of the secondary, netting turnovers for them. So he's one of those key pieces, especially considering the fact that they were going to be expected to lose Gilmore in free agency. So speaking of free agency, some of their moves that they made during the offseason was, they actually revamped the offensive lineup a little bit. So they committed to that. They got their center Bradley Bozeman from the Baltimore Ravens. And then they also got a guard in Austin Corbett from the LA Rams. So some key pieces to the offensive line, some solid pieces too. And then they got a new punter by the name of Johnny Hecker, somehow managing to get him to Carolina away from the Rams too. They also got a backup running back in Deontay Foreman. He's an okay backup piece in case Christian McCaffrey gets hurt again. And then on the defensive side, you did re-sign Dante Jackson to a contract extension. So they got that priority all figured out. And then you also got Xavier Woods, not the WWE's Xavier Woods, the free safety Xavier Woods from the Minnesota Vikings. And then they did manage to lose Hassan Reddick, a key part of their pass rush, to the Philadelphia Eagles, and as expected, Stephon Gilmore to the Indianapolis Colts. But that was like well after the draft. Speaking after the draft, they managed to actually do pretty solid, despite not having that many picks. But the most important pick that they got was getting a lineman, a tackle by the name of Ikem Ikawunu from North Carolina State. And then surprisingly, they also got a quarterback from Ole Miss, Matt Corral. A little surprising there, but considering that the quarterback class was kind of weak and you had questions about Sam Darnold, I mean, can't knock him for it. But perhaps the biggest move that they made during the offseason was just very recently when they finally pulled the trigger. They finally had the little trigger on their finger, and that was getting the quarterback from the Cleveland Browns. Yes, the skid marks. Baker Mayfield. They finally got Baker Mayfield after months of like, should we get him? Should we not get him? Should we go after Jimmy Garoppolo, or should we go after Baker Mayfield after we failed to get Deshaun Watson? They finally got their man in Baker Mayfield for pretty much a conditional 5th round pick in 2 years. It's a 2024 conditional 5th round pick. I don't know what those conditions are, but that remains to be seen. Now, Baker Mayfield has to pass a physical, and I don't know when that's going to happen, but he has to pass a physical in order for that trade to go through. So the Panthers actually did okay this offseason. They actually did focus on the offensive line, make that a commitment. So, like I said, with the moves with Bradley Bozeman and Corbett, so that offensive line as well. Oh yeah, as well as Ekuonu. So the offensive line looking, at least on paper, a little bit better than it was last year. So they won't be giving up as many. They seem like on track to not give up as many sacks as they were the previous year. So that's a start. But still, there remains questions about the pass rush because you lose Hassan Reddick, a key piece to your pass rush, and in your linebacking core. So you still have Shaq Thompson, but he and others are gonna have to step up to fill that void. But the most important takeaway from this for the Carolina Panthers in this offseason and going into the regular season is who's going to be the starting quarterback. You have Baker Mayfield, you have Sam Darnold, you have Matt Corral, you have PJ Walker, you have a bunch of people on the quarterback chart. Yeah, everyone's expecting that Baker Mayfield's just going to win the job outright. But apparently, they're going to have a quarterback competition all throughout training camp, all through preseason. And then they're going to decide who's going to be the starter come week 1. So we'll see what happens there. But honestly, Baker Mayfield is kind of a slight upgrade, but not that much of an upgrade over Sam Darnold. But hey, we'll see what happens there. So some key games for Carolina going into 2022. Obviously, if Baker Mayfield does end up being the starter by the start of the season, it's obviously going to be week 1 against the Cleveland Browns, especially considering that, well, it's against Baker Mayfield's old team, and you don't know who's going to be the starting quarterback for the Browns. It could be Deshaun Watson. It could be Jacoby Brissett. Hell, it could be some other dude signed off the street. So it could be a potential revenge game for Baker Mayfield in week 1, or maybe it couldn't. But then I think the most important slate for Cleveland is your 3-game homestand 2 weeks later from weeks 3 to 5 against the New Orleans Saints, the Arizona Cardinals, and the San Francisco 49ers. That's going to determine where they stand in terms of whether they're going to be competing or they're just going to be fighting for a top draft pick or just be in a land of mediocrity in 2022. So that homestand against the Saints, the Cardinals, and the 49ers, it's going to be one of those early indications of where they're going to stand in 2022. So for the Carolina Panthers, it's going to be another one of those seasons where sure, they upgraded at some parts of the team, like the offensive line, and sure, they got a nice quarterback in Baker Mayfield, at least on paper. But still got questions about the defense, especially in the pass rush and the secondary. Can J.C. Horn stay healthy? Who's going to be that leading man aside from Shaq Thompson? So for Carolina, I imagine their ceiling is going to be 7 wins at most. But if everyone gets injured again or everyone underperforms, Matt Rhule like micromanages everything again, I imagine 5 wins again, another 5-win season, and perhaps Matt Rhule finally gets fired by the end of the season. So we'll see with Carolina. I don't have many high hopes for them, but hey, if Baker Mayfield's the starter, who knows? And Matt Rhule finally gets his head out of his own butt, stops getting in over his head. Who knows? Maybe the Panthers could be surprising, but I don't expect it.